welcome everybody. As you can see, we're at Wheaton College, one of my favorite places to be. I have a little bit of history here at Wheaton College. Absolutely love the place and I love the people. Today we're going to be interviewing one of the professors, Professor Iglesias, who was a JAG officer in the Navy, and you might have known a movie by the name of Few Good Men. Well, that movie was based on one of the cases that he tried, and he's going to be telling us about it and about a few other things. A very interesting guy, great guy, humble guy. I think you're going to enjoy him. So in the meantime, let me give you a little bit of a shot here and there of this place that I love so much, and enjoy. This is the Welcome Center, a beautiful building, and a vintage building. It's absolutely gorgeous, and we have lots of meetings over here and lots of fun things that go on. Beautiful. Look at it. Thanks, guys.
No problem.
This is the Todd Beamer Center. It's a Compass Dining. I spend a lot of time in here. Todd Beamer was a graduate of Wheaton College. So to honor him and his sacrifice, you know him from 9/11. Let's roll. They named the building on his behalf. I met his wife, his widow, Lisa, a couple of months ago. Lovely lady. And she's been working with Wheaton College for a long time. Beautiful, beautiful building. This is some of the dorms. These are very nice. And as you can see, they sleep here and they eat right there at Corée. Hey, welcome back to Hold the Line TV. I'm here at Wheaton College with Professor David Iglesias, and he's our guest today. Welcome, David.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. We met while you were teaching a class. It is a fantastic class. It's a class that I've never seen anything like it, because you begin with this wonderful dinner, and you have guests,
Right.
and you have these lovely students that we've gotten to know over the semester, and I was very, very impressed with them. Tell me a little bit about how the class came to be.
You bet. So initially it was a leadership class about 5 years ago. So the former CEO of ServiceMaster, Bill Pollard, was a Wheaton grad, and he wanted to teach business majors and econ majors leadership. So I helped him out when I came back to Wheaton in 2014. That migrated into another class that became known as Faith in the Marketplace. So we did business leaders. I invited people in various aspects of business to come share their story. Now my background is in business. It's the military, U.S. military, and public service. So I thought, who's in my network? And it became clear, public service. So I created a course called Faith in the Capitol House. So I brought members of the legislative branch, members of the judicial branch, and the executive branch. So those are the three branches in state and federal government. What does that mean? Congresspersons, judges, and appointed officials who work for the governor or for the president. And my own background is I was appointed to be a White House Fellow, a Special Assistant to the Secretary of Transportation under President Bill Clinton, and also appointed and confirmed by the Senate as the United States Attorney for the District of New Mexico for George W. Bush. So those are my two appointments. And then I was appointed by the Governor of New Mexico to run the Office of General Counsel in the Taxation Department. So I've got a lot of public service.
Wow, interesting. Now, one of the things that I find very interesting, that I thought was very, very nice, was the lovely dinner before the
Yes.
the presentation.
How did that come about? Well, these are future leaders. A lot of them will go into government, some will go in the private sector. I just wanted to create a nice space for them. So I make them go in the coat and tie, so it's all business and business casual. And I asked that our speakers are also in business attire. And we're trying to recreate it's called a C-suite experience or a corner office experience. So we expect them to dress up and we expect them to act older than their age, right? So with that comes a real meal, a real catered meal. And that's how I met you and David.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You were very, very kind in inviting me to attend one of the lectures, and a dear friend of yours came in and talked. He gave a wonderful, wonderful lesson, a presentation, and I thought, wow, I wish she was my teacher. He was really good. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that he did, he showed a very fun picture of you and him when you were younger. And you guys look so cute, because of course you attended Wheaton College. You graduated, as was your mom.
Yes.
Yes, tell me a little bit about your mom, because she was very, very impressive.
Yeah, so she was class of 1945. She had been I think number 2 in her class in high school. She's from Minnesota originally. Started off at a Bible school in Georgia, and I think she was only there 2 years. And then found out about Wheaton College, and she was here for at least 2 years, maybe 3. But yeah, she graduated in 1945. She was an English major and a Spanish. I think she was double major, English and Spanish, because she ended up finding out she had a gift for language. So she actually learned Spanish, like correct, not street Spanish, but grammatically correct Spanish. She also learned 2 indigenous languages, one from Mexico and one from Panama.
Oh my goodness gracious. You had an idyllic childhood. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, my father was a member of the Kuna tribe of Panama and Colombia, one of the few native peoples that were never conquered by either the Spanish, the Colombians, or the Panamanians, a very independent tribe. And he had the opportunity to receive his education in the U.S. His father was the first member of the tribe to receive a college education in the U.S. He realized how transformative that was. So my dad received his education in the U.S. Found my mom at a Wycliffe Bible Translators Summer Institute of Linguistics. They met in June or July, or married in October, so it was a fast courtship. They knew. They were 26, which at that time was pretty old, right? And they were married for almost 60 years. They ministered to Native Americans in Central America and in North America.
Oh my goodness. Now you went back and forth because they wanted you to have an education here in the States.
Right.
And tell me about that.
So here's what is not commonly understood with people who don't understand the missionary culture. Mm-hmm. When you are a foreign missionary living in a foreign land and you have children, at some point you have to decide, how are they going to be educated? Do we homeschool? Do we send them to boarding school? Or do we move back to the U.S.? Those are really your only options. And in my parents' case, they made the sacrifice of leaving the mission field to make sure we were educated in the U.S.
And you had other siblings too?
I had 2 older sisters. Right.
So you were the baby?
I was.
All right. What did you study here in the United States? Was it high school?
So I came as a first grader. So my first grade, or my elementary school was in the U.S., and then my mid-school was in the U.S. We went back to Panama for 1 year, and I went to an American high school in the Canal Zone. And then we moved back to the U.S. and moved to New Mexico, back to New Mexico. And I finished up high school at Santa Fe High.
I love New Mexico.
Oh yeah, thank you.
I love it. I served my mission in New Mexico. It was wonderful. I was there for about 1.5 years.
Oh wow.
It was really, really nice. It started in Albuquerque and ended in Albuquerque, and then I went through Las Cruces, which I fell in love with, and then different portales and different, I just love them. I think that's where I began to realize that maybe I would love the country. We think we're from, Barcelona, Madrid, London, Bournemouth, and we think, oh, we're big city people, we're so sophisticated. And then you go to these small towns and you learn about farming and you learn about their culture, and you think maybe we're not as clever as we think we are.
Right.
We're not as sophisticated. I learned a lot about farming and about the struggle of farmers.
Especially in that part of the country, because it's dry farming. They don't get a lot of rain, so they need a lot of irrigation.
Yes.
And they're always right on the edge of success or failure.
Yeah, and what sunsets, I must say. So you came to, you graduated and you decided to go to college. And what was your first, you say that you had a college that you preferred, but math wasn't too good.
Oh, yes. You did read my book carefully. That's impressive. So, yeah, I had 3 colleges I was looking at, the University of Oklahoma, Wheaton College, and Stanford. And my brother-in-law had gone to Stanford and done well, loved it, recommended I go there. I had great college boards on the English side, but on the math, not so much. So I did not get into Stanford, but I did get into Wheaton at University of Oklahoma. Looking back, I'm really glad that I came here because my faith stayed intact. I think had I gone to Oklahoma or Stanford, my faith may have been wrecked.
You think so?
Yeah, I do.
It's an impressive college. I have a very soft spot for Wheaton. And I noticed that a lot of the meetings, in fact, all of the meetings that we've attended, including your dinner, they begin with prayer.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a very open, faith-based type of education.
No, we're very clear about our mission. I mean, you can go on the front campus and you see For Christ and His Kingdom. We're
Yes.
very serious about that.
Yes.
It's something that's part of our culture. We don't shy away from it. We're not embarrassed about it. We don't excuse it. That's who we are. That's part of our DNA.
But you know what? People may or may not understand this, but I think that when you begin your day with prayer, or when you begin your meal, so you bless the food that you're about to partake of, when you begin your classes with prayer, there's a certain spirit that comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you notice that. Because, for example, I've gone to other colleges, which I'm very fond of, and it's not quite the same feeling.
Right.
It's just the atmosphere is a little different. So this is one of the things that I really appreciate about Wheaton College.
So I lead political economy study trips overseas every other summer, and I assign a devotional to every day because we're traveling for a month. Every day there's a different student that has to do a devotional and then pray. And I got that from the gentleman who taught me in the 70s, who led my study trip when I was a student. I was asking him for advice, and he said, have them lead a devotional and start the day with prayer. It calms them down.
Yes, yes.
And that was absolutely my experience.
Yeah, I think it's very special. You mentioned the book, and you're actually an author too. Is this the only book you authored?
Yes.
Okay, so this is a very handsome picture, as you can see, and it's called Injustice. The title. What about the title?
Well, I had to talk about my story. I served at a very high level at the U.S. Justice Department. So the president gets to appoint about 4,000 people, and of those, about 400 require Senate confirmation, and about a fourth of those, 93, are the chief federal prosecutors for the various states. The big states like California, Texas, Florida have 4 different federal districts. Smaller population states like New Mexico have 1. So I was appointed to be the United States Attorney for the District of New Mexico. So my job was to enforce federal law.
Wonderful. But you went to law school. In order to be able to do all of that, you first went to law school. Tell me about the law school experience.
Yeah, so came to Wheaton, graduated, took a year off, worked to earn money. I had gotten into some other schools, including one in Malibu, but there was no scholarship, and I didn't want to get in that kind of debt. And given what's going on now, I'm really glad that I didn't get into the debt game, because you can owe a lot of money. So I went home to New Mexico, and we only had one law school there. That was true then, it's still true. So I went to the University of New Mexico for my law degree, passed the bar exam the first time I took it, and then I had my first job as a lawyer, which was as a military lawyer in the U.S. Navy.
A JAG officer.
Correct.
Just for the people that don't know the difference between your regular lawyer and a JAG officer, what does JAG stand for?
So JAG is an acronym that stands for Judge Advocate General Corps. So each branch of the military, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines have uniformed lawyers. So you're an officer, so you go through training, military training, you wear the uniform, but you practice military law. That's all you practice.
Wow, interesting. Which leads us to how, when I first met you, I said, they made a movie about him, and I thought, oh really, what? Well, the movie in that we're talking about is A Few Good Men, and that is based on a case that you tried.
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that.
So I was just learning military court-martial work as a young lawyer. I think I'd been in about a year at this point, and my job was to defend sailors and Marines being charged with violations of military law. There was a code red in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and it was a hazing incident in which one Marine was seriously injured. Here's the problem. Guantanamo is a small base. There are only 2 lawyers, 1 prosecutor and 1 defense counsel. There were 10 Marines involved in the code red. So they had to find lawyers in Navy bases in Florida, South Carolina, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. So 2 of us came from Washington, D.C., and 1 was named Deborah Sorkin. Now, if that last name sounds familiar, because her younger brother was a screenplay writer and a playwright named Aaron Sorkin. This was his first movie. And she gave the transcript because she went down there with me for the pretrial hearing that laid out all the facts, pictures, she understood what the case was about. 7 of the 10 Marines, including Debbie's, took the deal, which was to get out of the Marine Corps and not face prosecution. But mine and 2 others said, we will not take the deal. We were ordered to do the code red by an officer, and we want to fight this. So that's what the movie is all about, is what happens when you're given an order that is of questionable legality. Do you have to obey it? Yes or no? And our defense was they were young Marines who didn't know that they did not have to obey an illegal order.
And it was an illegal order.
Sure, an officer can't tell you to beat up someone, who's in your company. That's not legal.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Now they took some liberties with the movie.
They did.
They did. Well, how did you think about that when you saw that? You saw the movie, of course.
Oh yeah, when it first came out. That's been 30 years now, almost 30 years. Well, I realized it was not a documentary.
Yeah.
They have to take dramatic license. You've been in the world of entertainment. You've got to make things interesting, and they made it more dramatic by making sure the victim died. In the real case, the victim lived. They wanted to make sure there was a shouting match between the colonel, played by Jack Nicholson, and Tom Cruise, who played our role as the defense counsel. That never happened. The colonel did not yell, "You can't handle the truth."
You can't handle the truth.
Yeah, that's one of the best. According to some poll I saw recently, that's one of the top 10 lines of all time.
Iconic line. Now, Tom Cruise's character is a composite of you and 2 other...
Right. So Don Marcari was one of the attorneys that tried the case. He was stationed in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And then Chris Johnson was stationed, I think, also in Virginia. And there are the 3 of us. We tried the cases all down in Guantanamo. In the movie, it's only 1 trial in Washington, D.C., but in the real case, there were 3 separate trials, all on the island.
For those that don't know very much about Gitmo, as we call it, Guantanamo Bay, what exactly is it, and what goes on down there?
Well, history matters. I was a history major at Wheaton College. The Spanish-American War concluded in 1898, and the United States got, as part of its spoils of war, the Philippines, the island of Cuba, Guam. We didn't want the entire island of Cuba. It's a huge island, but we did want to maintain or build a naval station. There's a beautiful, huge protected bay on the southeast corner of the island. It's where Columbus, on one of his journeys, he actually sat anchor right there in that bay because it's so large and protected. So the U.S. signed a deal, signed a treaty with the president of Cuba saying this base will be here in perpetuity unless both parties agree to end it. Well, when Castro took over, he wanted the Americans out. He cut the water line, so we created a desalinization plant, and we said, phooey, we don't have to leave because we want to stay here. Don't get me started on Cuba and Castro. That's not my area of specialty. But under legal analysis in international law, the U.S. is in a very strong position. We have the legal right to be there on Guantanamo. Now we use it for, the U.S. Coast Guard uses it for anti-drug trafficking in the Caribbean.
Okay. I hear there's a $50 million expansion on Guantanamo. What's going on down there? Do you know?
I haven't been there in about 7 years now. So I'm not really sure. I do know it's a 45 square mile base. So it's good size. There are piers for maybe 10 military ships. And it's had a very stable population. It's the first American military base overseas. People don't know that. Guantanamo was the first U.S. forward deployed.
I hear it's very busy down there. Is it still active?
Oh, it is. And now, and because of the war on terror after the 9/11 attacks, we put all the Al-Qaeda suspects in a separate part of the island.
Okay, so they're being tried down there?
They are. So by law, so these are similar cases to the Nuremberg trials.
Yes.
So this is to try war crimes in a military setting and not in federal court.
Okay. Now, moving on a little bit, at some point you decided when you got back to the States that you needed a haircut. And you went to a little place and you got a little bit more than a haircut, didn't you?
Yeah, I got a wife. I ended up getting a wife, which is pretty neat. Yeah, so I was not always happy with the base barbers. They were very cheap, but you just never knew if you'd get a good haircut. So I lived in Old Town Alexandria, Virginia. And on the same block where I lived, there was a really nice hair salon. So I called and asked for a woman hairstylist, and I got this beautiful dark-haired woman named Cynthia. She was single, and we started dating, and we dated for a year and a half. We ended up being married, and she's been my wife now for 33 years.
Oh my goodness, a long time. And I see from the pictures, she hasn't changed much, because we know her, she's gorgeous.
Yeah. Thank you.
And other than the hair color, she hasn't changed a bit.
Yeah.
You also run for office. Tell me about that.
I did. So I decided to run for the office of Attorney General for the state of New Mexico. And this is back in 1998. There was an open seat. So I knew it was going to be a hard election because since 1928, there have only been one Republican Attorney General. It's the state, at the state level, state government's dominated by Democrats. And I'm not going to say anything mean about Democrats. A lot of friends who are Democrats, but I've been a Republican for almost my entire adult life. So I figured, I grew up in New Mexico. I speak Spanish. I have a military background. I've been a prosecutor. I can do this. So I quit my job at state government, cashed out my state retirement, and ran hard. Came within 2 points of winning.
Wow.
So very close. So I got like 48.5%, and the woman who beat me got 51.5% of the vote.
That's very close. And that's your first time running for office?
Right.
That's very impressive. Very, very impressive.
That's what people told me. Now, I expected to win, but you know, I think I needed to be humbled. I think winning the first race is probably not the best thing for me. But it set me up to get this appointment under the Bush administration because I was considered an up-and-comer.
So how did you transition to U.S. attorney?
Well, there's a gap. So I ran in 98. I was appointed in 2001. So during that gap, I worked another job in state government, which I didn't really like. I didn't really believe in the mission, which is what I told my class yesterday. So that's one of my rules of public service. I have 10 rules. One is never take a job in an organization in which you don't believe in the mission.
Of course.
And I did that, much to my chagrin and much to my shame. It was a good lesson to learn. So when the Bush side was determined to be the winner, I thought, I've got the background. So I contacted my U.S. Senator at that time, was Pete Domenici, contacted his staffers. They all knew who I was. The entire state party knew who I was because I just run for Attorney General and things worked out.
Yes. Now, you did mention in the book that oftentimes that particular calling, it's misunderstood. Why do you think it's misunderstood? Because you have, for example, most people don't know that it's you're attorney for the Southern District of Columbia or the Southern District of... How is it divided? Why is it so complicated?
So there are 93 different districts in the U.S. The western states typically only have one district. Oh. So Illinois has 3. Well, a lot of it's just based on population. But there's some weird historical occurrences. So Oklahoma, which is a small state, should only have one federal district. It has 3. And I found out from the U.S. attorney from one of the smaller districts, what had happened is that the U.S. attorney hated the judge, the federal judge he practiced in front of. So the U.S. attorney contacted his senator in Washington and asked for a separate district. And he got it. He got
How did that
which
come
is
about?
unbelievable. Well, this is probably 90 years ago or something, when they could do things. I mean, now you're not going to see any new districts, but at that time they just said, okay, we'll create a new district.
What was your experience? You loved that job, didn't you?
Yeah, it was the most responsible job I've ever had. I was responsible for prosecuting about 11,000 federal cases. I had an office of about 150 people, about half of whom were federal prosecutors. Being a prosecutor, especially at the federal level, it's the only job in America in which you can take someone's life, liberty, and property away from them and do it completely legally. So significant powers and responsibilities, but you have to be very sober-minded, because if you leak to the media that you're investigating somebody, even though you know you can't prove the case, that leak can ruin their reputation, can ruin their business. I had a federal judge tell me, be really careful how you wield the power, because it's significant. And I'm really glad he told me that.
Oh, yeah, I would imagine it's going to have to take everything, including their lives. It's going to be a tremendous responsibility. Have you known of people that maybe didn't take it that seriously?
Those people don't last.
They don't last.
There's another U.S. attorney fired for cause in one of the southern districts. I don't remember exactly where, I think somewhere in Alabama. And he didn't take it seriously. He was gambling at the local casino with his girlfriend, which his wife didn't appreciate.
Oh.
And so he ends up getting fired. Another one, because we're not supposed to be engaging in partisan politics, so he used his office fax machine to announce the investigation of the opponent of one of his friends that was running for office.
Oh, wow.
He got fired. So there are cases in which, for a cause, U.S. attorneys get fired. But by and large, because we pass a really extensive background investigation, it rarely happens.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to go too much into it, because I want people to be able to read the book, and it's beautifully written. But you also worked with immigration. Tell me a little bit about immigration, and what do you think is going on these days? Are we doing what we ought to be doing, or are we not?
So the border states, so on the southwest border, so Texas to California, all have the busiest caseloads because of a large number of people that try to walk across the border. And we have about 700 miles of wall, but the border is 2,000 miles long. So most of the work of the Justice Department is related to immigration, illegal immigration. Look, my father was an immigrant, but he came illegally. He went through Ellis Island. He went through the process. He became a naturalized citizen. And when I used to speak at immigration, naturalization ceremonies in federal court, I would thank the people for doing it right. You respect our laws, you respect our system, and you did it right. But if you, for whatever reason, just want to take the law into your own hands, there should be a penalty attached to that. The problem is the sheer number of people coming across the border. During the peak year, which was about 2000, 2001, we interdicted over 1 million people. 1 million. The Justice Department only prosecutes about 70,000 cases a year. So there's no way we can prosecute 930,000 more cases. It's just simply impossible. There's not enough courtrooms, judges, jail space, So we have to send them back. All that to say, our immigration system is broken. America is a great country, and everyone knows it. That's why everyone wants to come here. I mean, how many people are trying to walk across the border into Russia or China? None. And there's a reason for that. Even affluent countries don't have the kind of problem. We are the immigrant country. And I've asked my students, name all the immigrant countries you can think of. It's a short list. It's less than 10 countries out of 200.
Even UK is one of them. Yeah.
Right.
Spain's another one.
Yeah. Those have been fairly recent. The U.S. has always been an immigrant country.
Yeah.
But what's going on is because this is such a great place to live, everyone wants to come here. We can't accommodate 500 million people. We have to have laws that create procedures by which you can come legally. Just like every other country has laws, and we respect those laws. I mean, I can't just walk across the border into Mexico or Canada. I have to go through their port of entries.
Oh yeah, they're very stiff. Laws are very stiff over
Right.
there. Yeah. So you had, I don't want to dwell too much on the actual case because you go into it quite beautifully.
Yeah, thanks.
And then one day, you're just about to get home and you get a phone call, and along came the firings. You got fired.
Yeah, that was a real shocker. Only time in my life still. I've been out of law school now for 34 years. Is that right? No, wait, I'm losing track of time. 37 years. Wow. I'm flying back from Rhode Island to New Mexico, and I get a phone call from a friend at the Justice Department, and he indicated, we want to go a different way. We want to appoint someone else. And I tried to ask him why, he wouldn't tell me, and I thought, that's just bizarre. Because I knew that my office was doing a good job because we'd just been evaluated. So I knew it wasn't performance, and I thought, it's got to be politics. Because that's a political appointment, right? So I found out within days that there were several other U.S. attorneys that also received the same phone call on the same day, Pearl Harbor Day, yesterday. So it was a real shock because I had plans on running for elective office, and I realized if I spoke out, those plans would have to be modified or changed.
Yeah. Here in the pocket it says something Gonzalez said really stuck to my mind. He said, "This is a tough town. They are out to destroy the president, and it's my job to protect him." And it says here, who knew he would even break the law to do it? How did he break the law to protect the president?
I think, so that refers to me meeting with White House counsel. At that time, it was Alberto Gonzales, who later became my boss as the Attorney General of the United States. The Bush administration tried to force my other former boss, John Ashcroft, into relinquishing or into signing a warrantless wiretap after 9/11. And one of the things this country stands for is the government has to abide by the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, which requires a warrant. And Ashcroft was in the hospital, and Gonzalez and Andy Card, who was the chief of staff, tried to get Ashcroft to sign. He was under the influence of just having his appendix removed.
Yeah.
Or maybe it was a gallbladder. Anyway, he just had surgery, and he goes, "I'm not the Attorney General, that man is." And he was pointing at Jim Comey, because Jim Comey was the acting Attorney General until Ashcroft could get better. But the fact that they would even think about doing that was indicative of everything that the ends justify the means. And when you start looking at that, laws are going to get broken. Also, the torture issue, which I don't go into, the United States does not have a history of torturing people, but for a couple of years it did, and it was completely legalized by the Justice Department.
How did they legalize that? What rationale would they have to do that?
Because they defined torture as treatment that leads to organ failure or imminent death. So in class, I tell my students, so if I drive toothpicks under your nails with a hammer, is that torture? Well, yes, it is. Is it going to kill you? No, it's not. So using their rationale, if it's not going to lead to organ failure or imminent death, that's not torture. What about if I slap you around and keep you awake for 48 hours, 72 hours? Is that torture? Yes. Is it going to lead to organ failure? No. So it was a hyper-legalistic definition that made all kinds of abusive treatment legal. What they didn't look at, or what they ignored more likely, was the U.S. signed the Convention Against Torture. We signed the Geneva Conventions, Article 3, which talks about treating everyone, not abusing people, not humiliating people. There's some pictures that I show in class of in Abu Ghraib of a group of Al-Qaeda suspects that are forced to make a human pyramid naked.
So bad.
Is that torture? No.
Well, I don't know.
But it's abusive. It's
Yes.
abusive and humiliating, so it violates international law, which the United States signed.
Yeah.
So using, dogs barking at someone who's unclothed. So that's what I'm talking about. That thing that we're going to do everything we can to protect you, even break the law.
Do you think they took liberties in terms of taking our freedoms away with the Patriot Act?
The Patriot Act, it's still good law. I don't have a quibble with the Patriot Act, but I do quibble with how we treated people suspected of terrorism.
Are we good in terms of prosecuting terrorists, or are we just kind of flimsy?
We're in pretty good shape. We've put a lot of terrorists behind bars, both the Justice Department and the military. Yeah.
All right. So needless to say that when this became a little bit of a hoopla, the Democrats kind of like
They globbed
jumped.
on it. Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
In fact, we have a letter here from Chuck Schumer, who wrote a letter on you guys' behalf.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about that.
Well, so Senator Chuck Schumer was the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, and he went to bat for us because he believed that our firings. Remember, it was just more than me. There were
Six.
seven. There were 7 in one day. That number is kind of squishy because there were a couple that were fired previously, like 6 months before and 1 year before. They were test cases, but in one day, 7 of us got the same phone call. So he's basically saying you've got to let federal prosecutors do their job. You can't interfere. You can't put political pressure on them. And I mean that's what this book is all about.
Yeah.
You need to protect your federal prosecutors because they wield significant power. They've got significant responsibility. You can't urge them or intimidate them or lean on them to file cases that have a political reason for it and not a factual reason.
Yeah. But you say that it was political. It seemed to me from reading the book that it's like they said, well, if you're not part of a team, we don't want you here.
Right. Yeah, one of the things was the voter fraud issue is they were convinced there was massive voter fraud. I investigated it. I worked with the FBI and other law enforcement agencies. I had a press conference, set up a toll-free number, and at the end of our reporting period, which was I think 3 months, 4 months later, not one case could I prove beyond a reasonable doubt. And nobody believed it, or the political operatives in my party didn't believe it. And this is without them looking at the evidence, looking at the reports, talking to the FBI agents, things that I did myself.
Now, is this the first time that George Bush got elected?
No, this is 4 years later.
4 years later, so we're talking about the Gore.
Right. No, so we're talking about in 2004.
2004.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's between him and and who's the other? Kerry?
Bob Kerrey.
Bob Kerrey, yeah.
That's right.
And there was no fiddling?
I couldn't prove it. Remember, you have to prove an allegation. You can't just go on what the newspaper says, because the newspaper is they're going to rely on rumors and incomplete evidence. And in a court, you can't introduce that. You've got to prove evidence that you can prove beyond a reasonable doubt.
Did they have the Dominion machines then that we have now?
I don't know.
No?
Yeah.
All right.
But that's part of why myself and my colleague in Seattle was fired, because we didn't intervene with what they believed to be massive voter fraud.
Yeah. So you had to testify with a wonderful picture over there. You had to testify in front of Congress. It was all.
Right.
Oh, how did that end? Without giving too much away, though.
Well, let's say there were 7 investigations launched, and none of the 7 concluded that we were fired properly. And right behind me, or right to my right, I have a letter of apology from the Attorney General of the United States, Michael Casey, apologizing for how we were treated during this termination process.
Yeah. At the end of the book, you have excerpts from National Association of Former United States Attorneys Resolution, and here it's NAFUSA?
Yes.
What is that? It's a bipartisan organization.
So it's a group of former U.S. attorneys going back to the Eisenhower or Kennedy administration, and they've never done this. The only time they've ever issued a public statement was when they saw the danger of politics interfering with what United States attorneys do. It's really important work, and you've got to create a firewall to protect them.
Yeah. Do you think because of that experience that you guys had, they're better off today? They're better protected?
I think for a season, there were no allegations that I'm aware of during the Obama era. During the Trump era, the president called the U.S. Attorney in Atlanta and tried to get him to file voter fraud cases, and he resigned. He didn't do it, but he resigned. I'm going to talk to that guy because it's a very similar, because I got 2 phone calls, but not from the president, but from a senator and from a congresswoman.
Interesting. Well, it's all in the book. If I may, I'd like to bring us back to Wheaton.
Sure.
And your class. As you graduated, you go forth, you have all these wonderful experiences, and now you find yourself in these fantastic room talking to these great students. And you look at them and you think, wow, you got all your life ahead of you. What is your hope for them? What is your message to them as they go forth?
Well, be prepared to do the right thing, even if it's going to cost you, because they're young, they've not experienced significant setbacks, but I just told them this last night. You will have setbacks, you will fail, but you've got to be resilient. You've got to build in resilience, because life is full of unexpected blessings and surprises and disappointments and failures. I mean, I never saw this coming. I thought I would serve out my 8 years and I'd run for office. It didn't happen. But it made me a better, more moral person that I survived that, with my integrity intact. And I tell them, your reputation, your integrity is everything. Is the only thing you have. Don't sacrifice that.
You think you might run for office again?
I doubt it.
You doubt it?
Yeah.
You got soured on politics?
It's a lot more contentious than it was when I ran. We didn't have to worry about social media. I didn't have to worry about tweeting every 30 seconds or whatever it is. Yeah, I think, I didn't have to raise nearly as much money as senators and representatives have to raise.
Okay.
I'm going to leave that to wealthy people.
You've been teaching here at Wheaton College. Do you see yourself staying here for a little while?
Yeah.
Do you see
No, I love being able to walk to work. I love being able to walk half a block to get food. I love the weight room. I love the students. I love the summer political economy trips that I get to pick and choose. I love not keeping a timesheet, which a lot of my colleagues who are earning a lot of money have to keep timesheets every 5 or 6 minutes. I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, it's been absolutely fascinating. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
You've been very, very generous with your time, and wish you the very best.
Thank you so much.
What's for the next semester?
National security. So I'm teaching a course on how the United States keeps its people safe. And I'm bringing in people from the CIA, the DIA, Homeland Security, the Justice Department.
I need to sign up.
FBI. I'm probably forgetting a couple. A Navy SEAL. Yeah, I'm bringing in a friend of mine who was a Navy SEAL and retired recently.
He's going to be great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.